Hi everyone, this is Michelle from Clever Carbon, and we're here with part 2 of what is carbon footprint. If you missed part 1, it's on our Instagram and TikTok and other channels, so be sure to check that out. And today we're going to be talking about the carbon footprint of food because it's something that we consume every day, and understanding the carbon emissions and the carbon footprint of our food can be really impactful. So you can see one apple is 35 grams of CO2, a serving of rice is 330 grams, a serving of chicken is on average 1360 grams, and a serving of beef is 7,700 grams of CO2. So where does the carbon footprint of food even come from? Let's dive into it. Alright, so first things first, in order to get an apple, we need to grow it. And to grow it, we need equipment like tractors, we need fertilizers, and tractors use fuel, which release carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions, and fertilizers often release nitrous oxide, which is another greenhouse gas 300 times more potent than CO2. Next, we need to harvest the apple, and we need equipment for that and potentially some warehousing and processing as well, which consumes energy and fuel and as a result releases greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide. Now, after we harvest the apple, we need to store it, and we often store them in warehouses which require refrigeration, which means a lot of energy used to keep the apple cool, and there's lots of carbon emissions because of that. So after we store the apples and they're ready to go to the point of sale, we need to transport them. And for the most part, we use trucks to get it from one place to the other, but sometimes we need to ship it overseas and over water, and sometimes we fly them too. I used to live in Toronto, and the grocery stores there had apples directly from Fuji in Japan, and obviously there are carbon emissions from the trucks, from the boats, they use fuel, and from planes as well. Now, once the apples are transported to the point of sale or the retail position, there's carbon emissions there. So there's lights, there's refrigeration, there's staff there, but all the items in the retail location share the carbon emissions, so it's not as high in this step. And the emissions of the apple don't end there. When we consume the apple, there are carbon emissions as well. So if we consume it raw, then there's minimal emissions, but if we eat apple pie, we have to turn on the oven. There's emissions for the pastry, the aluminum foil. If we eat dehydrated apples, there's probably some machinery to dehydrate the apples, and there's carbon emissions there as well. So how you eat your apples has a different carbon footprint. And there is one more step after consumption, which is post-consumption. Very clever. But if we throw an apple into landfill, it will typically travel quite a long distance, and underground where there's no oxygen, it will produce methane, which is 25 times more potent. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and it's worse than carbon dioxide. Now, if we compost the apple, it typically travels less distance, and it produces CO2 during the breakdown decomposition process instead of methane, which is ideal because, again, methane is 25 times more potent, and the soil then goes back into the earth, creating a more circular loop. So as you see, this apple has many stages in its life cycle, and you can use the same framework to apply to any type of food, any product that you buy, any service as well. And there's actually an industry term for what we walk through, which is a life cycle analysis. Sometimes you'll see it as an LCA, but many companies and brands are starting to perform LCAs on their products, and they're even sharing this information with their consumers so that people can understand the carbon impact of the product and see where it is at each stage, and we think that is a great thing. Thank you so much for tuning in to What is Carbon Footprint Part 2. If you don't know what your carbon footprint is, head over to our website and take our 2-minute quiz. If you found this content helpful, please share it with your friends, and we'll see you soon.